This is the Catholic obligation on which we say we should raise the minimum wage by William Asher and Zach Jones. All right, so starting off, what is minimum wage? Well, minimum wage is the lowest wage permitted by federal law, which is $7.25 as of right now. The last time minimum wage had was risen was July 24th, 2009. It's been 11 years since that time, and I say that is a very long time between between the last raise because cost of living has increased tremendously and people have become poor because of that. Uh, it's never been adjusted to inflation, so uh, people or the cost of living and minimum wage have never been on equal terms. So this has been very bad for families because they can't afford to live off the $15,000 uh, the worker makes every year because of minimum wage. They can't support that financially. Next, we can go on to one counter argument, which is, won't raising minimum wage lead to job loss? Job loss? Well, no. As of because Fiscal Policy Institute actually found that between 1997 and 2007, the states that raised their minimum wages above the federal level experienced better employment and small business trends than states that did not. This shows that these state increase in minimum wage can increase the economy in those states and lead to better lead to small businesses thriving. And so this debunks the myth that raising minimum wage won't will lead to job loss. Okay, next we can look at what the Catholic Church has to say. Well, they do support an increase uh, in minimum wage because the bishops made a statement saying that it's not financially stable for families to be supported on minimum wage because the amount they have to have from minimum wage would be about $18,000 and they only make $15,000. So it is not financially guaranteed that they could be okay on minimum wage. And so this leads to um, them saying that the government isn't giving the right to minimum wage workers to have basic living needs. So they're violating basic human dignity and and they should and this is why they should increase minimum wage because they're violating uh,
Simply put, minimum wage should fluctuate with rising costs of living in America. In an ever growing economic environment, a stationary minimum wage of $7.25 is honestly unfair. In the last 12 months, housing costs based on average rent prices across the country rose 3.5%. That 3.5% increase does not correlate with any increase in minimum wage. Given this increase in housing costs, families living on the margin should have less money to spend on other household items or any personal gifts. That 3.5% increase has displaced many families from affording basic human luxuries such as electricity, appliance, even a car to go to and from work. As shown in the graph on the bottom right, there has not been a substantial change in minimum wage since almost 1980. Obviously, our economy has grown since 1980, yet our minimum wage has dwindled and dwindled and dwindled to almost no change in 2020. Under the whirlwind that is the Trump administration. In some select states, you can see an almost 30% increase in housing. For example, in Colorado, a $692 one bedroom apartment has now increased 77% to $1,226. In New York, a similar phenomenon occurs. The Trump administration has also taken responsibility for a 30% increase in inflation, which extremely displaces the prices of not only houses but small household items such as groceries, bills, clothes, simple items that me and you can afford from day to day really prove as a challenge for those minimum wage workers. Given these housing cost increases and inflation prices, minimum wage should fluctuate with inflation and those same housing prices to correlate to achieving a decent life and the ability to move financially in America. Catholic social teaching number 4 shows us that labor is our way of participating in God's continuing act of creation. We must always work to maintain the dignity of workers. The church has stated their obligation to supporting those marginalized. They do understand that the power over those marginalized is in the owner of those businesses to provide them living wages and safe working conditions. A $7.25 minimum wage is no longer livable in this ever-growing economy. Given the house pricing increases previously mentioned with the 30% inflation under the Trump administration, which America is currently under, proves that these wages are no longer livable. Such a low minimum wage proves to diminish the human dignity of a person and proves to discount the gift that God has given us in the ability to work and for and reflects even poorer on those who support such a low wage yet pocket and survive off of those menial jobs provided by marginal workers every day. Lastly, such a low minimum wage inhibits a decent life. Catholic Social Teaching 2b states that setting up society so that everyone has the opportunity to thrive and live fully human lives. Everyone also includes future generations. Having such a low minimum wage is impossible to maintain a decent life in any of the 50 states. Stated a $55,000 median income is needed to own a home, take care of household bills, and afford very few luxuries in any of the 50 states. Now, working minimum wage with the maximum hours allowed, you will only equate $15,080, and that is with zero expenses, which is theoretically impossible. People must be able to solidify themselves in an ever developing economy and also establish wealth to pass down to later generations for their families. People should be able to provide for their families in a healthy way. I also think, side note, paying people more will inhibit them from committing more financially based crimes in the name of survival. Now, just like you, I also have concerns about raising the minimum wage. How are local businesses going to support those profit margins? What is going to happen to our tax bills? Now, those are all valid and feasible concerns, but we must ask ourselves, what can we do to improve the lives of those less fortunate? One, we can shop more frequently in local businesses in our area, which returns money into our local economy, which pays those minimum wage workers better wages. We should be generous in tipping when a good job is done and realize that those minimum wage workers are trying their hardest yet receiving very low pay. Also, companies and the government should extend their aid further to provide for those marginalized. In America alone, $934 billion was spent just this October to account for all military spending to only last us to September 2021. A portion of that spending could go to raising the minimum wage workers of some industries. Now, I'm not saying we need to defund our military, but some of that money does need to be redistributed into bettering the lives of American citizens right here on our soil. To conclude, my call to the Catholic voter is for them to find it in their hearts, as Jesus did when he died on the cross, to side with the marginalized and work towards a common good that not only benefits them but the people less fortunate. I urge you to visit the two scriptures labeled under reflection to really take into account God's words around showing compassion to those that are less fortunate than us. Both scriptures provide multiple insights on our responsibility to be taking care of those workers and our responsibility to work for the common good and to set aside our selfish means and selfish desires and try to focus on how we can uplift everyone, and everyone includes ourselves as well. We must realize in achieving a common good, everyone wins. There is no loser. We must attempt to play that game with no losers instead of a game where there is only some winners. America is an ever-growing economy, and it's time for the minimum wage to reflect that same growth. pay our minimum wage workers more than $7.25 for their labor and dignity is priceless.